Yeah. I know exactly what that feels like. I used to be like that. I used to come running home from work, literally, in the days when I was young enough to run. running back from work. Ali would meet me at the door and be like, no, I just need to go upstairs. Get upstairs and start, get this sound sorted, and then it either worked or it didn't, Yeah. And then it was like, oh, hello, how are you doing, darling? Oh dear. Must be terrible being married to a musician, eh?
I wonder sometimes. My wife's good to me when it comes to music. She's gotten better over the years too. I remember there was conversations we had young years where I'd say like, this is who you fell in love with. Like you have to accept that. Either accept it or don't. But you can't expect me to like all of a sudden like dedicate less of my energy and love to music. And which I think was one thing about our relationship, because we bonded over music. We're both music lovers, but she didn't realize that there was different levels, I think, of music lovers.
Yeah.
But thankfully my wife does have a great taste in music, and she accepts my music in a loving way. Like I don't like my music. I don't think she would listen to voluntarily, but because it's written by me, like she listens to it deeply and gives me feedback, and her feedback gets more constructive as the years go on, and she's really good about it. Like I'll show her a song that I know in my gut isn't right. There's something seriously wrong with it. And she nails it on the head every time. She knows exactly what's wrong with the song.
Really? That's useful. That's very useful. That's wonderful. Yeah.
It is. Yeah, and I've given her the confidence to say it without thinking I'm going to be upset about it, because I don't think I would have taken that same criticism 10 years ago as I would now. But
Well, criticism's always I welcome it with open arms, and I wish I could get more of it. I wish people passing by, if they would, it's not fair for people passing by, is it? People who come and leave a comment and they say, oh, I really enjoyed that, and you go, yeah, how exactly? In what way did you enjoy it? I'm terrible for that. Yeah, you liked it, but I need more than that. Or that sucked. Really? Tell me how it sucked, because I would really love to know how it sucked, because I'll do better next time. Yeah, I love
more of that shit. Yeah, like, because I like to hear someone's defense and why it sucks, and if they make no sense or they just sound like an idiot, I'm like, oh, perfect. So it's a great song then, and you're just an idiot.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't really have the vocabulary or the language or vocabulary to really describe what it is that they don't like in any detail. They just know it doesn't work for them, And you can go through it with them and say, well, is it this, is it that? And they don't really know. Quite a lot of people. It's a funny thing, because we, as creative people, as musicians, we probably know what we like and why we like it a lot of the time. Not always, but a lot of the time. And that's what we are doing here on this show, isn't it? We're analysing stuff and telling people what we think about it. So that's what we do all the time anyway. But a lot of people haven't got that. They haven't done that, so they don't have the chops to say, oh well, the reason I didn't like that track was that your bass drum was a bit flammy with the hi-hat there. Oh really? And then you listen close, you go, God, that's right, that bass drum is flaming with that flipping hi-hat. I hadn't spotted that. Thanks very much, mate. I'll fix that. They just don't, they don't know. They just know it doesn't sound right.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true. Do you find it deeply offensive when you ask someone what kind of music they like and they say everything? I listen to everything.
Do I find that offensive?
Yeah, I do. I find it deeply offensive when someone gives me that answer for what kind of music do you like? Because I want to say, and sometimes I do say, there's no possible way you like everything, and I guarantee I like more music than you do, and I would never say something that narrow-minded. Yeah.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't annoy me. I've met people who I think genuinely liked everything, and I could never figure out whether it was because they had no taste at all, or because they had better taste than me, or they were just accepting things in a way that I wouldn't accept things. I can think of two people that seem to have that seem to have just the most wide-ranging taste, to the point where I would like half of what they liked. There was a guy called Gordon that used to follow our band a little bit, and he attended our few gigs. He attended them and stuff, and he went to every gig that he could go to, and it didn't matter what it was. It didn't matter what it was. He seemed to have no filter at all. He would just go, any gig that was happening that he could get to, he would just go, and he liked everything. And a guy I worked with, a guy who's got an outfit called the Cloudland Blue Quartet, a guy called Dave Riley. He was like that. He is still like that. He collects CDs, and it's like the most wide-ranging collection you could ever think of. Everything's in there, well, just everything. So if you said to him, what kind of music do you like, he could genuinely say, well, I like everything. And he likes classical, he likes jazz, he likes blues, he likes country and western. There's no genre that he doesn't like, But I've got to say, I think people who say they like everything, you're thinking I see you're doing your version of everything, which is your obsession with everything, meaning everything. Yeah, that's right. No. You couldn't like everything. There must be artists that you don't like. But when someone says, "Oh, I like everything," I think what they mean is they like the full spectrum of all the different genres. Although there might be people within those genres they don't like.
Well, see, when I say if I were to say I like everything, that's what I would mean. Is like what you just explained. As far as I listen to every genre. There's certain things I don't like, but my music tastes are all over the map. But in my experience, when I say to somebody, when I challenge them, when I just meet a stranger somewhere, and a lot of these conversations I have were with strangers and service calls. Like, these are people I'm meeting at concerts or at clubs. These are people that I'm fixing their fridge or dishwasher or something, and just having a conversation, because music always came up, because people often question my look, because there's not a lot of technicians with beards and long hair, right? Like, I've never met another pine technician with long hair, and I've met thousands of technicians, right? So they automatically assume there's something off about me. Right, so they have to get to the bottom of it. Like, why is this weirdo have long hair? And it's like, and as soon as they find out I'm either a radio DJ or a musician, they're just like, oh, it makes sense now. You're
okay.
Bohemian. You can't be bothered to cut your hair. That's all it is. Which is partially true.
You lazy bastard. Yeah.
So what I mean is, when I ask these kind of people, I say, like, so when the conversation goes to music, I want to talk about music. I want to talk about, and when I say, what do you like? I want to hear them say, I like X, Y, Z, so then I can talk about that, because there's a good chance that no matter what they like, I probably like.
Yeah.
Or I'm familiar with enough that I could hate that band, but still have a constructive conversation. Like, I used to, like, Foo Fighters is a band a lot of people like. They say, I love the Foo Fighters. And I'm not a big fan of the Foo Fighters. Mind you, the newest album I think is fantastic. But outside of that, I'm not a fan of the Foo Fighters, but I've seen them live 3 times. So I can talk about the evolution of the Foo Fighters and their experience and how influential they are and how great they are without actually enjoying them. So someone will say to me, like, oh, I like everything. And I'm like, well, that's not a conversation to have. So give me more. Like, what do you mean by everything? Like, give me like a spectrum of everything. And they'll say, like, everything from like Michael Jackson to MC Hammer to, like, I like the Spice Girls, and and they just name a whole bunch of pop artists over the span of a decade.
Yeah.
And they're like, that's not everything. That's literally all kind of the same thing.
That's one little part of it, you moron. Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. Are you being serious right now? Yeah.
And that's so when I hear someone say they like everything, it's very rare I have someone who can list a breadth of music, like your friend that's got all those CDs that he collects from everywhere and goes to every concert.
Yeah.
And I don't meet a lot of people like that. That's where I love people like that. I want to meet these people that when they say everything, I get offended, and then they prove me wrong.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
It does sometimes though. Like I've made those comments to somebody about their meager record collection or album collection, and they say, come downstairs, let me show you something. And then I walk into this room of instruments or records or stuff that makes me look like a amateur.
Right.
And I realize I've been humbled.
Yeah.
But those are the people I hang out till 11 o'clock at night drinking their scotch, talking about everything.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, Dave's house would be like that for you.
Yeah.
His living room is very minimalist. He has this minimalist living room. Our living room is anything but minimalist. It's just filled with clutter and things every which way. But Dave's very sort of that way, very minimalist. I mean, you go up into they've got a spare room in the house, and it's just filled with CDs. And I think he has 10,000 CDs. He recently went through his 10,000th CD.
Jeez.
He keeps lists of everything. So he had a list in a book that he'd been keeping since the 70s of all the albums he's bought. and he showed on he keeps a blog, and he showed on his blog the 10,000th entry. So that's how many CDs he's got in his house, in one room in his house. 10,000. Can you imagine it? 10,000.
That's amazing.
I've got maybe 1,000 there. Another 10 of those. Bloody hell, no. It's too much. It's too much. I couldn't operate like that. I couldn't have everything. How can you have everything? What kind of brain must you have to encompass everything?
Well, that's it. And any effort is just a waste of your precious time too. Like it's like how much.
Well, there's that as well. How much time have you got? I mean, because it's probably not true, but I feel as though everything you put in, something has to be dropped to make room for it. Well, that's probably not the way the brain works, but
it probably does to a certain extent. But there is that, whether it's the brain or just the physical time you have. Like you can have 10,000 records, but who do you have time to listen to 10,000 records? Like he could literally.
Yeah, I'd
probably
exactly
spend the rest of his life trying to listen to his record collection one more time, and probably couldn't make it through it. And that's scary.
I suppose there comes a point in your life where that's true of everything that you might do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
might go, there's a certain point it comes, I'm never going to listen to that again, or I'm never going to go to that place again. Yeah, but yes, I don't listen to my collection very often. I don't dip into it. I'm aware that I'm curating it and I'm adding to it, but I don't dip into it.
Yeah.
Not unless it's for something like this, for what we're doing here. There's a few CDs that are in there that are also on Bandcamp, and then it sort of takes me back a bit.
Are you familiar with Henry Rawlins at all?
Oh yes, oh yeah.
Yeah. So he's a huge music fan, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't align with his taste in music at all. I find it completely. I don't understand. He's got speakers. Like if you type in the world's most expensive speakers, you'll see pictures of Henry Rollins speakers, like that, whatever brand he owns, and they look like robots. They're like ridiculous looking. They're like 8 feet tall, and he listens to like punk rock on it. Mm-hmm. Listens to thrash, and I don't understand that. Whereas I'd be listening to music that has fidelity. It'd be like,
of course,
like the Kior or something.
Yeah.
And but when the way he treats music is from Monday to Friday. He only listens to music he's never heard before. And then on the weekends, he listens to music he knows he likes.
Right.
And that's how he treats his music listening experience. So all week, he goes to record stores and buys albums and CDs of artists he's never heard of, or albums he's never heard by those artists. And all week long, he calls it like he's eating his vegetables. And on the weekend, he gets dessert. And
that's what a bizarre. He is very autistic, though, isn't he? He's very behaviourally. What's the word? He's channeled in his behaviour, isn't he? He's obsessed by things and
he's
intense, very intense. Have you seen that film? He Never Died.
Yeah, my wife recommended it one time, and I thought it was great. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
That scene where his potential girlfriend manages to get him to say all the jobs that he's done, and there's this list that goes on and on and on. It's just what a great film that is. And he's never been in anything else like that at all.
No, it's kind of just they decided.
They made a sequel. They made a sequel and he's not in it.
Oh, really? That's too bad.
Yeah, they did. They made a sequel. It's not very good, apparently.
No.
But he's what a film that was. That was one of those films that kind of took you in a real kind of journey.
And the thing I find weird about that guy is because he's fascinating in so many ways, but he's most famous for being a musician, and that's the worst shit he does. Like I can't stand his music. Like I've never heard a song.
Is he not more famous for being a stand-up now to modern people?
Well, that's where he kind of became. But like he got his when he was 18, 19 years old, he joined that band Black Flag and was like their lead singer for throughout the 90s, and he sang tone deaf, out of tune the whole time he's in the band, and it was all about violence and anger, and eventually it became his band, and then eventually it all fell on his shoulders, and the band was always poor. And by the end of every tour, it'd be just him on a stage reading poetry because the band would slowly fall apart because he couldn't afford to pay everybody, and it always ended with him on a bar stool. And that's how he became this kind of poet, spoken word kind of guy.
I didn't know that bit of the story. I didn't know the transition from the band to the sort of public raconteur kind of thing that he does. Yeah, I like what he does, except for his music, like you say, because I keep seeing him, and there'll be little bits and pieces pop up, and that film, for example, And then I think, he's a really cool guy. I must go back and listen to. And then I go, oh no, that's not good.
No.
There's something really, really, for me, inaccessible about what he does. Musically, it's just a kind of slab of sound with, as you say, if he's singing out of pitch or out of key, that can be very effective with the right sort of approach. But I don't think he's got the right approach for me anyway.
No, it never resonated with me, even though Black Flag has inspired many musicians I like. Like there's a picture of Mike Patton when he was originally in Faith No More wearing a Black Flag t-shirt, you know? And like, how does someone as brilliant as Mike Patton get anything out of Black Flag? I don't get it. Is it something to do with not the music, with something else that they're, you know, it has to. An attitude, or I don't know, something like that. Has to be that, really, doesn't it? It does, because I mean, like, there's like, say, Tool and Maynard. Like, I love Pussifer and all that stuff he does, but like, he started out as being in the band Green Jelly, you know, and there's a few songs Green Jelly's done that I find really impressive. But for the most part, that band is unlistenable, you know. And you go back to that stuff, and there's all that noisy stuff happening in the U.S. back in like the you know, mid to late 80s, you know, that was, I think, was like a purer form of punk rock, you know, because I agree with Frank Zappa's take on punk music, that punk was a fashion. It wasn't an artistic statement. There was nothing truly artistic about the Sex Pistols and that kind of punk stuff. It was more about leather jackets and like jewelry, you know. And then out of that came like the youth that were inspired by this movement, that were really pushing the punk rock attitude, because they were poor kids that didn't have studios. And like, it's like, if you like, I don't know, I'm not much of a punk purist to talk enough about the Sex Pistols and the Ramones and whatnot, but like, as far as I'm concerned, Nevermind the Bollocks is considered like the premier, like the Big Bang. This is punk now. This is where punk is. This is what it is. And then it kind of unfolded from that. But that album to me is like the antithesis of punk. Like, it sounds to me like it was recorded in Abbey Road. You know, like it's pristine. It's, you know, like that's, you know, then you get to the Melvins 10 years later, and that's punk rock to me. You know, like, that's where these guys they're jamming in a basement, and, you know, it's all mono, and it's one microphone in the middle of the room, and he's singing into the same microphone they're recording the band with, you know, and it's like, and it sounds great because you can tell it's just fury and passion and sweat, you know. And so, yeah, to me, I feel like Henry Rawlins was part of that. I just don't resonate with it, you know, because he was part of that pure punk where it wasn't about fidelity. It was literally about, you play your guitar so you can't afford to put strings on it anymore. And then you go back to work at Burger King till you can afford to go back on tour. You know, to me, that's the real punk.
The punk ethos for me was permission to dumb down the music, which was very important for people like myself, because I was listening to a lot of progressive rock. And the first time that I really saw in popular culture that dumbing down of music, which brought it into my realm, was with punk, where I could say,
okay,
anybody could play that. Jesus, I could play that. Krautrock did it a little bit, and the stuff that came after punk, which was the sort of new it came after punk, but it wasn't connected to punk, but it was sort of new electronic stuff from the early 80s. That was another place where they were making music that I could definitely see myself making. So that was what punk really meant to me and to a lot of the people I knew. It wasn't so much of the fashions, the fashions were the fashions, but it was like, oh, you can make loud, noticeable music just by banging your guitar through a loud amplifier and just sneering over the top the way that John Lydon did, you know. And that was what made the Sex Pistols for me. It wasn't so much the rhythmic arrangements or anything like that, which were basically founded on, as far as I could tell, what we would have called in those days pub rock, which was there was a pub rock kind of wave that hit before punk. Gosh, I can't remember any of the names of the bands, but it was kind of basic rock and roll music, you know, without the punk attitude. I think Ian Dury and the Blockheads might have come from that in the early days. God, what was the name of the other band? Oh, I can't remember now. Anyway, so that's what it sounded like to me. It sounded like this fairly unsophisticated pub rock. But then you had this guy, this presence, who when he appeared on Top of the Pops caused waves. When we first saw that on Top of the Pops, along with The Damned were on as well at one point with their did they have New Rose or something was on there? There was Eddie and the Hot Rods. These bands started coming around in '76. It really was. It was like a breath of fresh air. But for someone who liked prog, it was really only that it gave permission to make music that didn't sound like prog.
Okay.
And that was the important thing about it for me. And that later developed into all kinds of stuff.
That's funny because that was like the effect that Nirvana had on, I think, my generation or my friends, because before Nirvana, and like Soundgarden and those guys, it was like Guns N' Roses and like Van Halen and like Maiden, and like every band had a guitar player that was like insane, and it was like the drums were always intense and everybody was dressed up like a woman and everything had fireworks, and it was always this big to do that you could never do in your garage, right? And then all of a sudden Kurt Cobain's out there dressed like we were, or like our friends are, and you can do that in your garage. You could easily play any Nirvana song in your garage and play it worse, and the worse you play it, the better it sounds. It's kind of so I get that. Then I get that. It's for me looking back on it, because it's like I remember friends. When I was a little kid, I had a friend named Ray Seeger who I've lost touch with since I was a teenager, but he was the one that informed a lot of my musical taste and decisions as a peer, because he was 2 or 3 years older than me, but he'd been held back a few grades, so we were much closer in intelligence, but we were really kind of far apart in age. So the wisdom he had of being older than me, I found infectious. But I think the fact that he was kind of dumb, he could get along with me because I was younger than him. So we had this like weird connection that involved him being immature but yet mature, and we complemented each other, really yin and yang kind of thing. And he was the one that got me into like Nine Inch Nails and got me into Tool and got me into Nirvana. Like I remember when Kurt Cobain died, he was all upset, and he was like, "Did you hear who died?" And I was like, yeah, Frank Zappa, man, because he had died like a month or two earlier, And he's like, "Who the fuck's Frank Zappa? Kurt Cobain's dead, man." And I was like, "Who the hell's Kurt Cobain?" Like
Yeah.
and I had never heard of Nirvana till a week after he died,
Ah, right.
Because I was 10 years old when when
Right.
Kurt Cobain died.
Right.
But that's cool. I was 10 years old. I knew about Frank. I didn't know about Kurt. So that was kind of a badge of honor.
Yeah, well, they made a big impression when they came over here. They played, I think it was the Reading Festival or something, and everybody was talking about them. They made a big impression. And there was a guy, a Scottish guitar player called Big John, who hung out with them when they played in Glasgow and got to know them quite well, and lived off that reputation for the rest of his life, I think.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny that happens, and Kurt Cobain's one of those guys like Jimi Hendrix that'll, not just because of the age, but just the flash in the pan. They didn't play a lot of tours. Like they played live a lot, but I mean, you only had a chance to see them 2 or 3 times. And that was it.
Yeah.
And that was, unless you maybe if you lived in Seattle or something, or like in Los Angeles, you may have had a chance to see them more. But if you lived, I think they came to Toronto 2 or 3 times. So like it's one of those things that you'll hear a million people say they saw them, and only 1,000 people could have seen them. Like there's a venue in Toronto called the El Macombo, which is a dive bar. Like my band used to play it when I was in high school, and the Rolling Stones played a concert there one time, like free. Just showed up one night. I guess they were playing a show either the next night or 2 nights later in Toronto, and they were in Toronto early because Toronto is like a hub, I think, for people when they go on tour. Because I don't know what it is about Toronto, but a lot of bands warehouse there, and they'll rehearse there. Right. So like when AC/DC goes on tour or Pink Floyd, for the North American leg, they'll be in Toronto for a week, and they're rehearsing in a warehouse somewhere in Toronto before they start their tour. So their first and last concerts are often in Toronto, which is kind of neat. What band was I talking about again? It was I forget now. Fuck. Whatever.
We're talking about Nirvana.
Yeah, I know, but it got into something else about
and then
band staying in Toronto, and it doesn't really matter. I forget what it was, but it was something about Toronto being a hub for bands. But I don't think it ever was for Nirvana. I forget my point was. It doesn't really matter.
I'm I'll listen back to this and you'll hear it when we put it out. You'll be, oh right, that's what I was talking about. Pick it up in the next episode.
There we go. All right.
Yeah, it's funny, eh?
It is.
Yeah. I remember when Cobain died. It was quite a shock.
I remember what I was going to say.
Yeah, it was quite a shock.
The Rolling Stones were hanging out in Toronto doing one of their big tour preps.
Ah, right.
And they played a show for free at the El Macombo, unannounced. Just put like one of those sidewalk signs. It's a triangle with a chalkboard on it.
Yeah.
And it's wrote like Rolling Stones tonight, free. Come on in. And it holds maybe 100 people, like maximum capacity, right? This club. So
yeah.
I'm sure with people pushing at the door and screaming and whatnot, they may have squeezed a few more dozen in there. But I've heard more people literally tell me they were at that concert that could have possibly been there with my own ears. So it's
yeah.
But and then I say I played there before. They're like, really? The El Macombo? And I'm like, you've never been there. Kavork, like it's a fucking hole in the wall. Everybody's played there. There's homeless people sleeping there at night. But
yeah.
And I remember I saw a band there one time called Dredge. I don't know if you've ever heard of them before. They're kind of an unknown band from the US. And the lead singer plays lap steel guitar.
Oh, right.
Like just intermittently. And he had the lap steel guitar was on a table right at the front of the stage. And I was dying of thirst. It was a really hot summer night. And I think I'd probably been partying a lot and I wasn't hydrated properly. And he had this big, tall glass of water sitting next to his guitar. And it sat there all night. He never took a sip of it. And I was dying of thirst. And they'd finished their concert and they were just, waiting to come back out for their encore. And I was like, fuck it, I'm drinking that fucking glass. Like, I'm dying here. So I just reached on the stage and grabbed it and chugged it back, and it was pure rum. It was just a glass of white rum. And I'm like, what the fuck? So what kind of problem this guy had? He just has a glass of rum anytime he might need it. But it was horrendous. I didn't drink the whole glass. I drank about a third of it and then handed it to my buddy because he was like, give me some of that, because he's thirsty too.
Yeah, that's exactly what you need when you're thirsty. Half a pint of rum. That'll just go down. That'll reach exactly the right place. You won't care. You won't care anymore about your thirst.
Exactly.
Oh, God. I was looking at... I was thinking about... I wasn't really thinking about it seriously, but I was thinking about going to see a band in Leeds. Did I tell you about this before?
You might have.
Yeah, I did, because you mentioned the Leeds connection. Yeah, the King Buffalo are playing in Leeds.
Yes.
In a social club. I can't get over this. I was showing my niece was over the last couple of days and I was showing her, you never guess where King Buffalo are playing. It's this tiny little venue in Leeds. Oh, can't believe it. Such a great band.
I got to listen to more of them. I'm not as familiar with King Buffalo as I thought I was. But
they are good. They are really good. In fact, my niece really likes them now as well. She's a big fan.
Nice.
Everything they've done is great. One of those bands where they didn't start slow and work their way into it. They just arrived, and everything they've done has just been great.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, really like them.
So is it hot there in Scotland right now? It is hot as fuck here right now. Mind my language, but I am sweating. My bottom of my feet are sweating right now. My ass crack sweating. My forehead. Like I am sweating.
Too much detail, man. Too much detail. Is it hot here? It never gets that hot. No, so it's not. It's warm. It's been warm today. That's all, though. Yeah. I wouldn't say it's hot.
No, like right now is.
If you watch the.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go. You go.
Like I said, so right now it's 23 Celsius with the humidity. It feels like 30 right now, and it's 10. Wow. It's 10 o'clock here. I'm like, what the hell? And we don't have air conditioners and stuff here, right? Because in Nova Scotia you don't need air conditioning apparently. And I'm going like, how do you sleep when it's 30 degrees in your bedroom? I can't do it. Like I'm gonna try. I'm gonna be down here at probably 2 o'clock in the morning on the floor, laying on the concrete floor, trying to suck as much energy out of myself as I can. I don't know. And I have a big 16-inch industrial fan on the floor here that can blow my hair like Steve Vai, but it doesn't sound good on the microphone, so that's why I'm baking.
But you're in your basement, so that should be the coolest place.
It is. That's what's freaking me out. It's gross.
Right.
Like Mackenzie, I got to change her. She's having her onesie changed 3-4 times a day because she keeps sweating through it.
Oh wow. Yeah.
And I can't. I'm not we have a swimming pool. I can't complain. I have an ocean and a swimming pool.
Right.
So it's not like it's in the vanity of that. Like, I can't believe there's we didn't build the swimming pool. It came with the house, right? We moved in here. Like, the idea of filling a fucking hole with drinking water and then chlorinating it so you can swim in it just seems like so fucking wrong to me, but especially if you live on the ocean, like you can literally see swimming water. Yeah. But you're going like, well, I don't want to walk all the way down there. Like, I got to climb down a hill and walk over some sand,
Yeah.
So it's beyond me. Like, I don't get it, but but now we have this house with a swimming pool.
So is your swimming pool full just now then or empty?
Oh, it's full.
Oh, it's full.
We don't fill it. Like, it's been full since we got here, and it was green and had about 5 feet of dead stuff in the bottom of the pool. Like, because it had been left untended for probably half a decade. Right. So it was just full of, and because we're in the country, it's full of like dead rats and mice and snakes and frogs and just leaves. And they had a fence around the pool that was full of rose bushes.
Right.
So every time it was windy, all the petals and leaves would flow into the pool and everything. And so we had to shovel out like several hundred pounds of just like black sludge out of this thing.
Oh, wow.
And we had no idea because you couldn't see the bottom of this pool, like, because it's in ground too. Right, so it's like a big concrete hole in your ground with a liner in it, right?
Yeah.
And so we dug her all out and kept working at it, throwing chlorine at it. Chlorine, like hundreds of dollars of chlorine we threw at this thing, and eventually we could see the bottom of the pool. And it took like in our spare time, it took about a month to clean this thing out.
Really? Gee.
And then, and then once we got it cleaned out, we got the right, we got all the right chemicals, copper sulfite and baking soda and muriatic acid, chlorine, and some other chemical we use to balance the pH and all the other shit. And now we got it like crystal clear. It looks amazing.
Wow.
And it's been like that since. And to be honest with you, we're bailing water out of it more than we put water in it because it rains more than it evaporates.
Ah, right.
Right. So we had, I don't know if you heard, like, we had the worst rains Nova Scotia's ever seen, apparently, like last weekend. We had, I don't know how true that is, but we had 250 milliliters of rain fall in 2 hours.
Wow.
Right. So there was some towns that were out like completely underwater. Like, they were just like in the valley, in the middle of the province. The valley just filled up and turned into a fucking river overnight.
Wow.
And luckily, because we live on a hill on the side of the ocean, so it just runs by us into the ocean. So we don't, but I've been living here for a year, and I got hit with the worst hurricane we've ever seen, apparently, and the worst rain we've ever seen. And it's just fucking terrifying. I picked the wrong side of the country to move to, But I joked about it.
It's not
when we first moved in here. My first thing I said was, I can't wait for the the next hurricane. I want it to be the worst hurricane we've ever seen, and it was. And my whole family is like, "What the fuck, man? Like, how did you? Why would you? Who wishes for that kind of shit?"
It's you, isn't it? You're causing those gravitational anomalies, and you're causing the worst storms, and it has to be you. I mean, it's obvious. And
I slept through it. I slept through the hurricane. Like, when it hit us, I was asleep in bed because it hit at like 3:00 in the morning. So.
Oh, right.
But yeah, so it was around midnight. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I just fell asleep, and my wife laid next to me, terrified the roof was going to rip off the house.
Oh, wow.
And and it didn't. Well, actually, parts of it ripped off, and it's not the whole thing. But
just
and it's still tarped up. We're still waiting to get fixed too.
Oh,
We've got
right.
tarps all over the top of our house.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get bad storms here. Yeah, we do get that because we're like you. We're bordering the Atlantic. There's not much between us and whatever it is, 2,000 miles of ocean. So we get quite a lot of storms here, but they tend to hit the west coast. So I'm on the east coast, so we get the sort of tail end of it, or it's blown out a little bit. But sometimes it hits the west of Scotland. That can be really damaging. Yeah. But we're quite lucky. We're not in an earthquake zone. We don't have any tornadoes. We don't have any bears or wolves or deadly spiders or anything like that. So we're quite lucky. We'll take it.
We don't get tornadoes here, which is nice. Tornadoes are more of an Ontario thing.
Oh, you get them there, do you?
Yeah, I used to live in Tornado Alley, it goes right from a part of Ontario, and it goes right down through the middle of the United States and everything. All right. So we had a tornado in our backyard once when I was 12 or 13. Like it was, you stand outside, you could see it forming in the sky right above our house. Like the clouds were doing a big circle.
Wow.
And it was like, it was like, I remember I went and called my mom. I'm like, look at this. This is crazy. And I was like, and it was the definition of it, because the clouds around it look normal. And then there's just this big circle that looks like it's about 100 meters across. It's just rotating like a whirlpool in the sky.
Yeah.
You know? And that wasn't the one that hit us. That was just a funnel that was forming. It was like hours later, another one formed. And again, we slept through that. Like, we just laid in bed sleeping, and we woke up and all our lawn furniture was gone, and, you know, busted windows, and there's like, there's furniture in your yard that isn't yours, but all the furniture you had is in someone else's yard.
Gone, yeah.
There's canoes and stuff. I remember my one neighbor had a canoe that went right through his garage door.
Oof.
So it was just like this. Yeah. But no, that's wild. Some of the shit that North America is like, I could see why it was like the last place people settled. You know?
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like.
Well, it was the.
Oh, go ahead.
Go on.
I was gonna say, it reminds me of like what I think about like Africa, like the heart of Africa is what, like, I think North America is similar to it in many ways, but we hung around, we industrialized it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
But there's a theory, isn't there, that which you probably know about, that the not the bit where you are, but the west coast and south from there was the site of that flood that ended the last ice age. So there was a gigantic flood, which would have had a huge impact on any people that were there, which there probably were quite a lot of people there. So maybe it was all just wiped away, you know?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do.
It might have been settled for a long, long time.
What's it? Like, I know.
All disappeared.
That's like Graham Hancock's a big believer in there was a lost civilization in North America. Yeah. And that's actually funny. The friend that I was talking to recently, was about the eyebrow. Him and I got in a little argument about him because he doesn't like Graham Hancock, and he goes, he's just looking at stuff and making things up, you know, like he's just guessing. And I'm like, what do you think every other archaeologist has done before him?
Yeah, of course.
You know, like it's all the same thing. It's all just using the available science we have to us, and then like looking at stuff and going, well, it looks like this happened, and it happened this long ago. And, you know, and we have all this, we have a core sample. We're pretty sure that was here then, and that was over here, back over there. And, you know, but the way he approaches things and explains it, like, to me as a layman, I think he's onto something. Like, I mean, there's evidence that seems to be that we are much older than we have been led to believe as far as civilized humans.
Possibly, yeah. It's very, as you say, it's very difficult to tell. And I do like a lot of what he does. He's wrong about some things, though. I think the Peri-Reis map, which he says shows
Antarctica?
The coastline of Antarctica.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Antarctica clearly doesn't. It shows the turn between Panama and the bit of South America that sticks out into the Atlantic. That corner is what it's actually showing.
I think so.
And it's pretty clear. Once you go and look, you can see the rivers and things. And he kind of, what I don't like about him is, I wish he would just, when that kind of stuff is pointed out to him, he would just say, right, okay, that's wrong then. But I've never heard him do that, and that's one of the problems that, you know, traditional, conventional science has, is that quite often you get these people stuck in defending their territory, you know, because they've written books or they've written papers or whatever it is they've done. There's a lot of kind of weight to science which can't be moved. You know, there's not the momentum in science that you would sometimes like there to be. And so Hancock, from that point of view, is a great guy to listen to, because I think he's right about things. He's been proven right about some things, because I think he was advocating what he was advocating before Göbekli Tepe was discovered.
Yeah, that was his big thing.
But now that you've got clearly megalithic structures going back further than they were supposed to, and if you combine that with the flood stories, you know, you get this idea that there very well could have been entire, if not civilizations, then entire settlements that were just deluged. You know, so the mythology about the flood is probably a memory of that, you know. But yeah, he's fascinating. Whether, I don't know how much of what he says is right, because I don't know that.
Yeah, exactly.
And some of what he says is wrong, but I'm sure that some of what he's saying is spot on as far as timelines and things like that are concerned.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's why, like, you can't take anybody in his position as an absolutist because, because like you said, there's books, there's ego, there's, he's been fighting an uphill battle too, right? He's on the outside of an organization that doesn't respect him, so when, so he probably has a hard time admitting when he's wrong. In the same reverse reason, they're the same assholes they are to him, which is unfortunate, but he's opened my eyes, because he's one of those guys that, kind of breaks down the gateway between us normal people and the elite few that get their chances to make the decisions about what we believe as a science or history, because like all these different things we hang our hat on are decided by handfuls of people, like the climate change stuff, the COVID stuff, like it's a room full of people decide how we're going to move through, off of a handful of studies that are all biased. They're all loaded, with agendas and all sorts of stuff and political motivations that I don't know what to believe anymore because I hate that fucking phrase, trust the science. I mean, they twist it, right? The same people tell me to trust the science about a vaccine are going to tell me that men and women are biologically the same, right? I'm going like, come on, guys. Like, I mean, what science do we trust here? Like, do we... because we should be able to question all the science, but telling me that, one thing can't be questioned and one thing should be questioned is it's just absurd to me. It should all be questioned.
Yeah, that's
constantly.
That's why education is so important if you want to have a functioning democracy or any system of governance. It doesn't really matter what the system of governance is. If your people are educated and they're educated to the point where they can ask the relevant questions that need to be asked and judge the answers. But if you just have a whole bunch of people that can't, first of all, don't know what the question means, and then when they get the answer, they don't know what that means, so they only look for the headlines in the newspaper and they go by that. That's effectively how Brexit happened here. That's what happened. There was no substance to the debate at all. It just wasn't allowed in. I know that's not science, but it's the same thing. It's the same surface level viewpoint of everything, and it's completely changed from the way it was when I was a boy. There's a great debate. You can find it on YouTube. God, who was in it? I can't remember the names, but it was a debate in a pub featuring, I want to say, Tony Benn, who was a left-wing politician, and Enoch Powell, who was a right-wing politician, and a whole bunch of other people as well. And they were having this round-the-table discussion. They all let one another speak. There was no talking over. There was no shouting. There was no personal attacks. And these were people who were, had every reason to do all of those things if they wanted to, but they didn't do any of that. And the whole debate on anything has been turned into the equivalent of a freak show. It's like who looks best on telly, who speaks well on telly, who can hold their own when other people are shouting. And that's really what it comes down to. That's who gets noticed now, and it's so sad. We've got a guy over here, I don't know if you know about him, a guy called Nigel Farage, who was the very epitome of that. I used to like him when he was in the European Parliament, and he was ripping chunks out of the European Parliament and telling them how stupid they were and all this kind of stuff. And I quite liked him then. I thought I like to see that kind of rabble rouser, the kind of guy who shakes things up a bit. But my God, he took us out. He almost single-handedly took us out of Europe, or his party did, And I didn't like him so much after that. But there's people like that who are very charismatic and very good on camera, speak well, and defend themselves brilliantly by going on the attack. And those people can really cause an immense amount of damage. I guess if they were on the same side as you, it would be great, because you would think they were a hero sort of thing. But when they're not, it becomes very problematic. There was a guy called, I don't know if you've heard of George Galloway. He made his name was mentioned with regard to Iraq, and he's a Scottish guy that became a politician, went down to London, and I think he's Muslim now. And the American Senate tried to haul him over the coals, and they called him over, and he testified at the Senate, and he was absolutely brilliant on the Middle East and Iraq and how he was innocent. He absolutely tore chunks out of them, and he was my hero. I thought, God, that's great. but then he was against Scottish independence. And I was, oh my God, what do you do? What do you do when someone that you think is brilliant against you, you know? And you see something in them that's just, I didn't think, like, how can you think that? If you thought this other stuff, how can you think that? It's, you know, there's that sort of weird sort of dislocation, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think our I don't really think we have a democracy, but the democracy, I'm lumping all of the English-speaking world into this now, I suppose, but the democracy that we have is not functioning for us, for ordinary people. It's not, and it needs a shake-up. It needs something.
Well, I remember
something needs to change.
There's an American politician one time. I remember saying that like, because it's all about democracy versus like communism or something. It seems like, right? Like those seem to be the two options. And this guy was trying to say like, well, the U.S. wasn't supposed to be either. Like the USA is supposed to be a republic. Yeah. And in a republic, you're supposed to defend and cater to the needs of the few and protect the needs of the few from the needs of the many and the will of the majority. Because with a democracy, it's a popularity contest. It's got nothing to do with logic, you know. And as long as you can fool 50% of the idiots out there into voting for you, it doesn't matter what you do and what you say. You get people going on the same line. And like there's lots of brilliant minds that have talked about how flawed democracy is, even in its best version. You know, because you know, we see it like it's, if you gave children the same kind of clout you give a voter, you know, they would always make the wrong choices, right? Like if you give a kid, do you want a plate of broccoli or a cake, right? The kid's gonna eat the cake, but we all know you shouldn't, right? The politician is supposed to be the one, I think, or not politicians, but they're supposed to be the government, is supposed to be the ones that say like, look, you don't want to eat all that cake, like you kind of want to eat the broccoli, you know. And but I feel like the government's like, yeah, but if you vote for me, I'll give you 2 cakes. You know, and
yeah,
you know, and that's just that's what I see nowadays. You know, and it's just it doesn't matter how, you know, like this. But I see these points all the time that make me defeat on how I feel about politics and voting. And like South Park did a great episode one time, and I find it's funny, when I was younger, I agreed with everything South Park said. Nowadays, I can't stand them. I think they're a bunch of left-wing assholes, you know.
Right.
And I consider myself left-wing. I consider myself a liberal, you know, because I'm compassionate and I agree with social services and whatnot, you know. And I don't mind paying taxes and all that stuff. Like, none of that stuff bothers me, you know. I hate to see the misuse of my money and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, the South Park episode was about Edward Snowden, and I'm sure you know who Edward Snowden is.
Oh yeah,
right,
yeah.
And he, you know, and the conclusion was in the episode was that Edward Snowden, all he succeeded in doing is confirming again what we all of us who were awake already knew was happening, and everybody who didn't care still doesn't care. Yeah, you know, and he ruined his life to just literally put a check mark on a box that we all knew was already there. Mm-hmm. You know, and the idiots still rather watch football, you know, and drink beer and do whatever it is their friends do that the TV's telling them to do, you know. And it's sad because I've realized that it's an uphill battle, that if you're trying to sort of make people aware of their choices and aware of the corruption around them and how all this broken stuff is happening, like blue bins. Do you guys have blue bins in Scotland where you put your recycling in a blue bin and the city comes and takes it, pretends to recycle it?
We've got, let me get this right. We've got 1, 2, 3. We've got 4 bins altogether.
Okay.
So yeah. So we got the recycling sort of all split up into glass and paper, and the other one is sort of cans and things like that. Yeah. So we have all of that. Yeah.
Well, depending on where you live, like for us, that's just changed for me depending on where I live in Canada, right? So I've lived in places where you have to separate your paper, your glass, and whatnot in the different bins. And there are different shades of blue. Like it's like light blue if it's glass, it's dark blue if it's paper. And then if it's green, it's all like compost, right? Like food waste, like eggshells and banana peels and stuff. Where we live now, it's just, I think we just have recycling and garbage because we live in the middle of nowhere. So I'm lucky people pick up our shit anyway, because I lived in places where no one picks up your garbage. You have to take it someplace yourself. Right. You have to put it in the back. You have to load your trunk up with all your garbage once a week and drive to a dump.
Really? Wow.
You know, and pay $5 to drop it off.
Oh my God.
Yeah, you know. So it's, yeah, I mean, it's still like, I think by standards, like parts of Canada are still hundreds of years behind some parts of the world, by like just today, can't believe how we did it. But me and Megan got a doctor today.
Right.
Like my first family doctor in years.
Right.
It's in Nova Scotia, apparently the average person waits 5 years to have a doctor.
Wow.
Like, just to have somebody you can. So if I up until today, if I needed something, like if I need some blood pressure pills, I have to go to the hospital and wait at the emergency room to go see a doctor and say, hey, I need blood pressure pills.
Wow.
And he goes, really? Okay. Here's a script. That'll cost you $20. And then I go to the pharmacy and buy the pills.
Right.
And it's just absurd, like and we're told that we have the best healthcare system in the world. I don't believe it for a second. I do not. I think it's propaganda, 100%.
Sounds like it might be. We've got similar problems over here. I mean, it seems to be the English speaking world. There's something happening. I think there's something to do with the way that the English speaking world is becoming coherent around the kind of stuff we're talking about. Because I think if you went to Canada, America, the USA, as I should say, Australia, the UK, you would find the same things happening, the same movement happening, but that I don't think is there in Germany or Luxembourg, or I haven't heard about it. I know in the Netherlands they've had big protests about shutting down farms and things like that. So there are other things happening elsewhere, but there's definitely something. There's an agenda happening, and it's not even really behind the scenes anymore. It's kind of out there, isn't it? It's kind of, what's that guy? The guy that's the head of the UN, Schwab or something, or
yes, Klaus Schwab.
Klaus Schwab. I couldn't figure out if the video was some weird AI thing, but he was getting dressed up like an emperor. Have you seen that one?
Yeah.
Is that for real?
Yeah.
Is that?
He wears this bizarre clothes. It looks like it's something out of like an enemy from a Star Trek episode half the time. Like, I don't know.
Is that real?
Like some sort of space lord.
I just shied away from it because I thought I do not want to get sucked into that today. But it was kind of weird.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Netherlands, because like that thing that caused the farmers to revolt in the Netherlands, it was a lot to do with restricting how they can grow food and fertilize their food, right? And it was gonna.
They're worried about nitrogen for some reason. It's just,
exactly.
The whole thing's insane.
Yeah.
The whole thing's insane.
So Trudeau, our prime minister, is about to do the exact same thing to us that happened in the Netherlands. So I hope to God our farmers do the same thing. Because I'm terrified. Because I don't want food's so expensive already. I can't imagine food getting more expensive. Like, I don't know how. Like, again, when you didn't know me before I moved to Nova Scotia, but like I left Ontario avoiding oppression and forced vaccinations and losing my access to restaurants and all these things and concerts, and because I didn't want to make a choice, or I made my choice, but it wasn't the choice they wanted me to make, and then so I moved out here, and we bought a place on the ocean that has land around it. Like those are my prerequisites. I needed water and land, so that when I can't afford to go to the grocery store, or I'm legally not allowed to go to the grocery store, I can literally go in my canoe with a fishing rod and bring home dinner.
Yeah.
Like I'm not gonna starve to death here unless someone physically stops me from getting my food. But it's a terrifying thought, because 10 years ago I didn't think about the price of groceries. I thought about the price of rent. I thought about the price of my car insurance or my gasoline. But food is now my biggest concern. And in Canada, this year and the last 2 years, the biggest reason people took short-term loans, so we call them like payday loans. So you don't have any money in the bank, but you're getting paid next week. So you go to this place and say, hey, I get paid this much every week. So they'll let you cash your check a week ahead of time for 20% of your check. Yeah. Which obviously is a terrible idea for you, right? Apparently the biggest reason people did that last year was to buy groceries. So like 5 years ago, the biggest payday loans were for like concert tickets, or like, or like vacation. Like people just really wanted money now to do something they didn't want to wait to do. But now it's literally like, I'm going to go borrow money to buy food this week. Hopefully I figure out how to buy food next week. Yeah. And that's a reality for something like 40 or 50% of Canadians right now. Yeah. And they just keep cranking it up, right? And they added 20 cents a liter to gasoline a couple of weeks ago across the country. Yeah. So it's just like, so the price of food goes up again. Yeah. And they rose their interest rates again. I bet you they're probably raising interest rates where you are too, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. The interest rates have gone up. Yeah, definitely have. Yeah. We have more or less the same issues here because we blame it on Brexit, of course, which I can't think is true, because so many places are outside that
Having the same thing.
are suffering from the same thing. And it's that globalist agenda that was a conspiracy theory until very recently. It's happening.
Yeah, well,
they're doing it.
which I find funny. Like, I mean, there's recordings of George Bush talking about the original George Bush back in like the early 90s, calling it the Brave New World, right? And the New World Order. I mean, it's like he's like, there is a New World Order. Like, you're not going to stop it. This is coming. Like, you're just, it's going to happen around you. But anyway, like I was saying to my buddy yesterday, I said, what's going to happen anyway? Once this AI stuff starts taking off and we start building sex robots, humans are going to be extinct within 100 years. Because if I'd rather fuck a robot than another human being, we're all done anyway. It's coming.
Yeah, there'll be trans robots and God knows what. They'll have to add the R to the alphabet spaghetti.
Oh, there we go.
Robot rights, AI rights, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I mean, Trudeau could get voted out. Our guys could get voted out. I'm not sure if that makes any difference.
I don't think it does. That's the problem. We all get wrapped up in this whole if we just get this guy in, everything will be okay, and then it never is. It's never okay. It's
never
always
is.
more.
It's never okay.
It always comes to boil down to like, shit, he lied too. I thought for sure he wasn't lying.
I thought we were on a certainty there. I know it's like it's almost as though they take them into a little back room somewhere and they show them the secret. They show them whatever it is that they didn't know about before they got elected, and they come out of that room a completely changed person. I remember that happened to Obama. I thought Obama was going to be great, was going to be this breath of fresh air and all that.
Change.
And I thought he had a good, mature, reasonable attitude towards Palestine and what the Israelis were doing there, and he wasn't going to kowtow. Within 6 weeks, there's a picture of him before the days of AI, so it definitely was a picture of him standing there with the Jewish leaders from somewhere, and his whole attitude to the whole Palestinian problem just completely changed. He instigated a shoot to kill policy with anybody that he liked. They could just go and kill them without any process at all.
Yeah.
So he was that guy before he got elected, then he's somebody else. And I wonder with Trump if they never took him into that room.
Well, I don't think he was part of the plan. I think they just thought, we got 4 years of this shit. We'll just kind of let him do his thing.
Yeah.
And we'll try.
I wonder if he's the first one that they've gone, nah, don't tell him, because he'll blab.
Yeah, that could be it too. That could be it.
Yeah.
I don't know. And plus, I don't know. I'll never know what to think of Trump either. It's funny because the whole Trump debate in Canada is very hotly talked about. People care more about Trump than they care about Trudeau. Which is messed up.
Yeah.
But that's very common here in Canada. We're basically like the state that doesn't get the vote. Because we're just as affected by their policy, if not more so than they are. Because. Yeah. It's Canada's always on the outs with some sort of international deal with the U.S., but we can't do anything about it because we have no power or sway.
Yeah.
I'm just waiting for them to show up. I'm just waiting for them to tell us they want our water, and then we're just going to be, just either part of their country or not. I don't know, but because we have all the world's fresh water here, right? Like and we give it away. Like, I don't know if you know about there's like this thing called the Great Lakes Conspiracy, right? Where back in the 90s, we had this problem where we still have this problem where companies like Nestle, like I'm sure you've heard of Nestle, like they make chocolate bars and stuff. Yeah. Well, so Nestle owns a bunch of aquifers here in Canada, like natural flows of water that are like, we got aquifers in Canada that would dwarf your entire country, just like underground lakes where we pull up bottled water. We put the bottled water in little plastic bottles and ship it all over the world. And it never comes, and that water just disappears. It never comes back to Canada, right? And we just do this and Nestle pays us like $4 a year for all of our water, something like that. It's like $4 a year. They pay the Canadian government to take trillions of dollars worth of water out of the ground and sell it for whatever they want. So it turned out at one point that every time these big shipping barges that we see going across the ocean all the time, they come in up the Gulf of St. Lawrence and up into Toronto, like through the Great Lakes, and the ones that were going to China, while they were in there, they're filling their ballast with fresh water from the Great Lakes. and taking it back to China and pumping it directly into their aquifers because they fucked up a bunch of their shit because of their advanced agriculture. So they don't have the natural water anymore. So they just steal it from our own Great Lakes and they take it to China,
wow,
like trillions of gallons a day. And this got found out. I forget what prime minister signed the deal quietly with the Americans. It was a deal with the Canada and the U.S. because we share the Great Lakes together right there because our border goes right through them.
Yeah.
So it got found out. So one of our prime ministers, like Stephen Harper or Jean Chrétien back in the 90s, because of the whole Nestle thing, they had to rewrite the laws that you can only take water out of the country in a bottle, in a plastic bottle.
Right.
So I guess all these barges lined their ballast with plastic, and they can classify their barges as giant plastic bottles. And so
God.
Apparently now they fill these giant like bladders now. They'll drag behind their boats under the water you don't see. That is, they fill with fresh water now in the Great Lakes and drag them through the ocean back to China. Jeez. And this is like this known thing apparently that's been going on for decades and decades and decades, and yet we can't stop it. And our Great Lakes just keep getting slower and lower and lower. Everywhere else, water levels are going up, but our Great Lakes are dropping.
Are they actually dropping?
Oh yeah, by like 20 feet.
Oh my God.
Like it's ridiculous. Yeah. You know, and I have a lot of friends that live on part of that, because that waterway, like on where I lived in Ontario, right? Like Ontario's got like 1 million lakes, and we have 1 million rivers, and we have 10 million islands. Like the water system in Ontario is crazy. And we used to live on a lake where I grew up that was part of the Trent Severn waterway, whereas I was in a lake that I could go through a dozen rivers and a dozen lakes and make my way to the ocean. And so essentially you could get anywhere in the world from almost any place in Ontario if you have a boat.
Right.
So it's kind of neat, you know. It's like Swiss cheese of like just water over there.
Right.
And it's all just being drained out and shipped out so people can grow fucking garlic and rice in China, you know, or whatever else they're growing over there. And so, like, you see all this like atrocious stuff happening to Canada, and we just kind of like put up with it because we have this government that just sells us dry all the time. Like all of our crown corporations are sold to China. Like when you buy liquor in Canada, the profits go to China now. They don't go to the Canadian government because some politicians said, hey, we might make $50 million a year after selling liquor here, but we could sell the whole corporation for $200 million right now. And that they do this all the time. Like every time someone gets voted in, they pay for the debt of the last guys by selling everything.
Yeah.
You know, and then going like, oh, we balanced the budget, and then they raise the taxes again, and then all of our jobs go away. And
yeah, you
know, it's crazy. Like a good living now, like I make what's considered a good living, and I only make like $5 more than minimum wage.
Really?
You know, like it's fucked up. Yeah. Like minimum wage here is almost $20 an hour.
Right.
You know.
I don't know what our minimum is, about £8 or something like that. It's quite low.
Yeah, so I mean that's not. I mean that's kind of where it would have been when I was a kid, like in high school. Like I was making $7 an hour when I was in high school, working at a coffee shop. So I'd be like £3 or £4, but yeah, I don't know. It's because they tell us like, well, we have to raise the minimum wage because it raises the quality of life, but then everything goes up in price every time they raise the minimum wage. Yeah. Groceries go up, gas goes up, and
yeah.
And I don't know, and it's weird because I don't think people that work at McDonald's shouldn't be allowed to afford a house. Like they should be able to afford a house, but I should also make way more than someone at McDonald's because I'm a skilled technician and I've spent years honing my craft, you know. But it's, you know, they're just shrinking that gap so quickly, you know.
Oh yeah, that's happening everywhere. I'm just glad to be out of it, to be honest. We always used to say that the guys who retired ended up, if they lived long enough, ended up better off than anybody who was working because our pensions are index linked, so they're kind of protected, but wages aren't. I never got, I can't remember, I think my last wage rise was 0.5%, but my pension rise this year was 10% because it's linked.
Wow.
It's linked to inflation, and inflation was running at 10%, and the government, that's the UK government,
crazy.
And
that's awesome.
the UK government won't change that because their core voters are my age.
well, that's the way it should be, though. I mean, the living wage should rise with inflation. Like that's how I expect people to survive, you know. Because like here, seniors just got their first raise in pensions, I think, in 10 years this year, and it was like 8% or something.
Really?
You know, it was and you know, so it can be wild out here. You know, it's tough. Like I see people. Well, I mean, like I said, nowadays they're more likely to offer you assisted suicide than give you enough money to be able to afford to live.
I was telling people about that, what you told me about that assisted suicide stuff, and people don't believe me. See, they can't be doing that. So they are.
Yeah, Google it. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how easy it is to find Canadian news outside of Canada, but it's easy to find it for me.
Yeah. No, I did. I went and looked. It's right enough.
Yeah, a new bill passed now where the Canadian government has complete control over the internet here, like the Chinese government has. You know, so they can control what podcasts we listen to, what stuff gets suggested to us on YouTube. They control YouTube suggestions now.
Oh
the government,
God.
right? And
no.
so it's I know, and apparently. And Google's been forced to streamline the news. So it's like if you show like mainstream Canadian media, it's free. But if they start showing like the off the beaten path media, they have to pay extra for it. So it's not in Google's best interest to show independent media. You know, it's insane.
It is insane.
And look what happened. Like 10 years ago, Vice Media was one of those great media organizations, right? Like Vice was a Canadian news station. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with Vice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Gavin McGuinness, you ever heard of Gavin McGuinness? He's a Canadian-American political commentator.
Don't know the name.
He's a Proud Boy.
Okay.
You've heard of the Proud Boys? Yeah, they're supposed to be, like, they get labeled as Nazis, but they're just a bunch of like straight men that say like you should be proud to be straight too. You know, there's nothing wrong with being straight and masculine.
Right.
You know, having chest hair and liking to break stuff. You know, so he started Vice as like an alternative media to question the government. You know, and now like George Soros bought Vice like last week.
Oh, right.
You know, so now Vice is a Soros organization, right? So like obviously he bought it so he can at the end twist the narrative some way, right? How like it just because I mean Vice has this credit now. Like 90% of people probably still think Vice is a trusted news source, or that trust that they've gained over the last 10 years, but they really aren't now. Like they're owned by the same guys that own all the media, right? That's like. And it's funny, you ever seen when someone mentions George Soros, like on Fox News or CNN, or like they're in an interview and they're going like, you know, like, what about George Soros? And like the interviewer would be like, why are you even bringing him up? He's not important.
Yeah.
And they're like, he signs your paycheck.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, yeah, we can't talk about that. We have to end this interview or we're going to change the subject. And it's like, okay, I guess we'll change the subject. You know, so it's like, that should be a big like red herring for anybody.
It should be a red flag for everybody. But when I was saying earlier, this is something that seems to affect primarily the English-speaking world. It's probably because of that, because the people are able to control one language better than others, because it's all about language. It's all about what you're told, and that all comes to you through language. The ideas are told to you through language. So it might be something about the English language that makes it easier to do that job in the English world than it is to do it in the French-speaking or the Spanish-speaking world. Although I'm sure they've got their equivalences. So I don't know. I would need to know more about the world to try and figure that one out. But there's definitely something. There's something about the way that we think about things that is being twisted, and we're being encouraged to think about the other as the enemy, sort of thing, you know, and that the problems of the world are to do with these big things that you can't change, like, you know, a false history of gender. There are no men and there's no such thing as men and women. That's a false history, and that what is perfectly normal range of weather is somehow problematic because of a trace gas. And these ideas seem to be easier, maybe it's because they're easier to promulgate and repeat in English. I don't know enough about languages to know whether that's right or not, but there must be some reason why it's happening in the English speaking world primarily. Is it because of America? Is that all it is? It's just because America is the biggest influencer? I don't know.
Well, I mentioned that in a conversation with my buddy the other night, is how sometimes I feel like America is being punished for not obeying, right? Because I mean, America is like the last example of a society that's built on escape. You know, like it's, you know, it was, Europe didn't get their way over here, especially in the U.S., right? Like it was a failed colony that ran amok and then got its own foothold in and said, no, we're gonna do it our way, and you guys can just fuck off.
Yeah. And
that very quickly became an example of how the world should be, I guess, or the way we want to be, you know. And I feel like it's, like, I don't know, because I like to dig into conspiracies. When you like dig into stuff, it goes back farther than we want to believe, like the organization of the New World Order. Like, it goes back before like the Titanic sunk. It goes back before World War One, all this stuff, and I remember watching a documentary about how World War II was like a false flag, just like a lot of the wars we see nowadays, where like the way London was attacked during the war was all planned by people like the leaders of London, like the royals and the current like prime minister and everything like that. Like, they were telling the Nazis where to attack in London and what to do. And the Third Reich was under the direction of the world leaders, which was London and England, right? And I'm still of the belief that I think England is still the world power. Like, we've been led to believe it's the US, but I think England is really pulling all the, the deep state. It's all coming from there, like where the original like bankers and the original ideas that got us locked into this idea that we have to pay interest on everything and we're perpetually in debt. Like, debt breeds debt. It creates like a wealth transfer always to the top, like that was all designed there, and we're still suffering from it. So we never escaped it. I think we just had the illusion that we escaped it, and now they're just crawling back little inch by inch by inch and still trying to get like the agenda they had in the 1700s is now been shifted to like the 2100s, like whatever, and it's just, I think that's what happened. I think it was a big misstep on their part, and they just had to recalculate, and we're still living in it, and I feel like it's like this global thing that's just going to become this grossness, or there's reality behind it, and that the excess that the Americans have pushed on the world is too excessive, and that regardless if it's, I don't like to buy the whole climate change debate, because we've seen the climate historically make radical moves in every direction that are completely uninfluenced by the beings on the planet. Like, whether or not we influence the weather in a single increment this way or that way doesn't mean anything, because it's going to fucking flip upside down on us at some point, and nothing that we've done is going to have any influence one way or the other, right? We should work on maybe surviving that. Instead of trying to prevent it, let's run a way to survive it this time, instead of becoming cavemen again, so that 10,000 years from now, some other Graham Hancock can argue about how we actually existed before, before the floods. Like that's how I see it, So but we create these argument points, right? And we get cherry picked. Like, people talk about Greta Thunberg as being like this example, this voice of a generation of people who feel depressed and angry about the climate. Greta Thunberg isn't special. She got picked out of a crowd, and she's just a puppet, right? And she doesn't even know it, I don't think. She probably thinks she's special. But
I was just going to say about Greta Thunberg, she's I always felt sorry for her, because to me it was obvious that she was in real distress about the whole idea that she'd been given. Her parents are activists, so I think that's where it comes from. But I always felt sorry for her, because she just didn't understand. And so many people, so many good people I've seen who don't understand what's going on with the climate. They just, to them it's an agenda. It's an agenda, it's a political agenda. And they're on the side that claims the disaster, But if you try and argue with them, you don't get anywhere, because they've got all these fallback positions that they go to. And I went through it. It's probably took me 10 years to figure it out. So I remember back in the 70s, I was reading New Scientist at that time, because I had a job supporting scientists, and the scientific papers and things were always lying about. So I remember when the whole idea of global warming as an idea from carbon dioxide came in, and it was laughed at, because then the perception was we were heading towards an ice age, because the whole world was getting cooler in the 70s. But that's been erased from history. If you look at the official temperature charts, these cooler periods are not there anymore. Well, where did they go? They've been expunged. They've been taken out. So if you say to somebody, look at the temperature record, they're going to go and look at a record that's been changed. So to me, what you've got to do with that argument is you've got to actually understand the science. You have to understand how it works. And almost nobody does. Even people who are big on it, maybe physicists or whatever, will take you almost all the way, but they always stop short of the thing that would give them what's actually happening. and it's like I say, it's taken me a long time to find exactly why it is that carbon dioxide can't be doing what they're claiming that it's doing. I mean, and it's not just apocryphal evidence from ice cores or stuff like that. You have to understand the mechanism, and once you understand the mechanism, you then realise there's a reason why carbon dioxide is such a big player, but there's also a reason why adding more doesn't make it does make a mathematical difference, but it's nothing that we have to worry about. But it's just an awfully convenient scarecrow to scare people with and to bring people together, you know. And that's what we have to do. We all have to, everybody all over the fucking world is recycling their stuff because, and they're paying more for their electricity because, and you can't drive your car anymore because, and it's all nonsense. I mean, whilst we're all worried about that, there are real crimes against the environment that nobody's even noticing. Yeah. Nobody cares.
That's the part that bugs me the most.
Real problems. I remember Michael Crichton was a big opponent of the whole global warming thing. And I remember him making an impassioned speech, and he actually ended up in tears. He ended up breaking up because he said, you know, you've no idea the terrible, horrible things that are happening in the environment that are really going to cause us problems, and you're barely aware of them because you're all obsessed about a trace gas. That, I mean, most people, you ask them, okay, tell me what the composition of the atmosphere is. Not a clue. Not a clue. Yeah. You know, they think that carbon dioxide is 20% of the atmosphere, but when you tell them, it's vanishingly small. Well, anyway, we could go round and round on that one.
Well, exactly, and that's my like. It seems odd. The agenda should be obvious when they're trying to demonize people that talk about child sex trafficking and people that talk about like real problems, and then they'll be like, "What about the forest fire? What about global warming?" And you're going like, we flush plastic into the ocean. There's contraceptive in the rain. Like they find birth control in the rain, and you're worried about the temperature. You know, and you call Alex Jones crazy because he's screaming about gay frogs. The frogs are fucked up from the contraceptive in the water, and so are the fish, and so are the people, right? Like I think we'd be ignorant to believe that this transgender movement is strictly an agenda. I think people are sexually confused, literally. Like they've been drinking birth control since they're in their baby formula, you know, and in the breast milk. They got, you know, like no wonder they grew up not knowing like what their parts do and where they should put them and what they should feel. You know, on top of all the other crazy shit on top, you know, being added on it, you know, like it's...
Well, I think a lot of that...
Like, I'm not surprised.
A lot of that is to do with narrowing horizons for young people. When young people arrive in the world and they start to look around, and that happens actually before puberty, they start to actually go, well, what the fuck is actually going on here? They get an impression of what's going on, and I might be wrong about this because I'm not a historian, but I think the same sort of problems with gender identity happened at the end of the Roman Empire. I might be wrong about that, but I always remembered that.
I've heard the same thing.
I've always remembered that because I thought, well, for me, the American Empire is crumbling. That's one of the things that we're seeing is that the American idea of, you know, we've got everything and we've got the best of everything is now not the case. The best of everything is in the Arabian countries. You want to see the biggest buildings, the most fantastic architecture. If you want to see a population that gets everything for free, go to Saudi Arabia, go to
Dubai,
go to Qatar, and have a look at what they're doing. They are building the future, you know. So the empire is coming to an end, and people respond to that, and the way that they respond to that must in part be about their sexuality, because that's something that's it's the way that you make your mark in the world. And if you are saying, as so many young people are now, I'm not having kids, you know, that's the globalist agenda, right? They're happy about that. They're happy about that because they want fewer people. They want fewer people.
Yeah.
Which is like the most misanthropic thing I can possibly think of, that you would rather have fewer people. Not the same, not a few more, just half as many as we've got now, a tenth. What's your ideal number? Doesn't make any sense. And that's because this whole thing comes about because for a long time motherhood's not been valued. Parenting in general's not been valued. It's very, very difficult to do. You think about being a parent. You're a parent. I've been a parent for a long time. It's horrendously difficult, and it's only difficult because the fabric of society doesn't value it. It doesn't value it. It doesn't pay nurses and mothers to do those jobs. We'll happily pay footballers and pop stars millions, politicians millions, TV presenters millions, but we won't put the same amount of effort and care and consideration into the things that really matter. So when kids are growing up, they look around and they go, well, I don't want to have kids because that's too hard. All my parents have ever told me is how hard it was to bring me up, so I don't want kids. And then they look at the professions and they think, well, I don't want to go and be a nurse and clean up other people's shit for a living. Nah, fuck, I don't want to do that. I'll just go and work in McDonald's. You know? And that's how you get in that situation where you begin to notice big societal changes. But I'm an optimist after all that, after saying all those things. And I think these things go in cycles. And we're going through one of those cycles right now. But the good thing about it is, albeit it's a globalist agenda which doesn't serve our interests, there's another thread to it, which is, look at what you and I are doing. We couldn't have done this 20 years ago. So this is good.
I know.
This is good. What we're doing is good. And I've met people all over the world, and we're all talking, and there's a lot of that kind of thinking going on. So I don't despair. I don't despair, but I'm annoyed by how long it's taking for people to twig.
Yeah.
To twig that there's a better way. There's a better way to do this. And I don't have all the answers to what the better way might be, but it's not just voting every 5 years and picking that guy or that guy. It's a more direct form of democracy, like what the Swiss have or something like that. Or it's even more than that. There's a phrase that goes through my mind, which is democracy is not enough. Democracy is not enough on its own to see everybody where they should be. You need to design a system of governance, a system of being that gives you the outcomes you want. And what we've got is a system of being that puts the scoundrels at the top.
Yeah.
It rewards the scoundrels.
Yeah.
If you wanted to rule the world, okay, you want to rule the world and you're prepared to stab anybody in the back and steal anybody's resources, well, the system's perfect for you then, isn't it? Because we reward those guys. We put them at the top.
Yeah, the system is absolutely designed to put psychopaths right to the top. It's, whether it was intentional or not. I mean, chances are it was, because it's probably designed by a psychopath who convinced us he wasn't. And he went, look, guys, welcome.
Yeah.
All I have to do is the things I love to have all the power I could ever imagine. And I've been saying, I feel like the same way people like to say religion and government should be separate, I think politics and government should be separate. And I think government and politics and money should be separate. The government needs money to a certain degree. I mean, a proper government should need money. Money shouldn't be a factor for government. If they have resources and people, right, money shouldn't really be a factor. But I think this idea that politics and money are so linked, we're going to, I know Roger Waters wasn't the guy that first said this, but money is the root of all evil, and there's nothing, I don't think that's wrong. That's biblical. That's a tale old as time, that money corrupts and money becomes this ugly thing that goes from being something that's supposed to store value and represent value. It becomes the only value. And it becomes your motivation. It becomes everything that you're bound to, and I think, especially when we're at a point now where, especially the more digital we become, that the commodity of money becomes more and more meaningless. We're buying digital mediums of music so that the guy on the other end of that music can afford to take care of himself. Like, why should he afford to take care of himself? Like, the food's there. All the resources and everything is there. Like, we have the means to do it. We can do it automatically. Like, we don't need to have people in fields slaving over shit. We can have machines do it, robots do it. We have all that stuff. So why can't, Oxbow or Perry Urban, make music and how many times it gets listened to doesn't even matter, right? The fact that, like, you've been identified, you're a musician. That's what you want to do. Okay, that's what you're going to do, and that's it. You decide to do it. And I don't know. To me, I know that sounds utopic, but I mean, we have that capability. It's all math, right? I mean, we can fudge the numbers. Like, I mean, we keep adding extra zeros to the debt every year as this like facade to somehow like continue to exist as a country. When the government has the power to control interest rates and the value of money, why do they need all the money then? Like, why is it we can't afford to build a school? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. We have enough brick. Like, Alan Watts.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I say, well, one of my favorite things he said was like when there's a financial crisis and you show up to the bank and they say like, oh, there's no money here, the interest rates are all messed up, someone fucked up. Like, it's like going to a construction site and saying, sorry guys, we can't build today because you ran out of inches.
Yeah.
And like that's what I mean. Like, it's literally, that's all it is. Like, because inches don't exist, right? Meters don't exist. Yeah. They're a unit of measure. But like, it's like, yeah, that's like having someone show up and say, yeah, you guys used too many inches this year. You're done. Like, sorry, go home.
Well, money is it's a consensual construct, is what it is. We all consent to the idea that the money's worth something. So we're all in on it, and we all want it. But the better way to think about it, if you're designing a society, is to not treat it as money, but treat it as currency, like a current that flows between people. Because the way that you love a stranger is to pay for their services. That's what you're doing. You're the money that you pay to somebody who makes music or makes your lunch for you is a way of saying, I value what you just did. Here's $10 or whatever it is. So it's a currency that facilitates the functioning of society. But when people accumulate it, because they don't treat it like a currency, they want to hold it still in gigantic dams of money, right? That's where the problems occur. So if we treat it more like a currency, I think it would work better. But I agree with you. We should separate. Anybody who wants to become a politician should be prevented from being one, and the people who become politicians should be people who stumble into it, or ordinary people. And there's ways to do that. We have a jury duty system
exactly
here.
Yeah. Same here.
Probably that you have, where every so often you'll get a citation, you've got to go to the court and you've got to be a member of the jury. So why couldn't we have a parliament that's selected the same way?
Yes, I agree with it completely.
You select the parliament from all the people, random. They're the politicians for 6 months or a year, however much we want to work it out. And above them you have an executive who have administrational power but don't have any legislative power. The legislative power comes from that parliament. And that parliament can't pass a law without the approval of the people.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which I think is kind of what they do in Switzerland. I'll need to read some more about it because we're very interested in that just now in Scotland. But there are ways that you could design it, but good luck. Good luck trying to persuade anybody who currently has power to support your idea, because they're not going to do it. But it has to change. The pressures are becoming so great. The idea that you could have half of the population of a country unable to afford to eat, well, where does that go? That goes with them giving up going to work. It ends with them not supplying the value that the rich people need in order to steal the value. Because if there's no value, the rich people can't steal it either. So it doesn't go anywhere good. But I have this feeling that something will come along, some figure or some movement will start that will just sweep everything, and those guys that we're worried about will go back down into the sewer for another 5, 10, 15 years, however long it is, and they'll try and come back.
Yeah.
Because as you say, it's been going on for a long time. You could look at, I'm sure, the Romans, the Greeks, any empire has this going on, these machinations going on in it, and it's hard to know.
It is hard to know. And I mean, there is end in sight potentially. There might be a change. There might be because sometimes, like, if I want to be an optimist, I see the one world government as being the solution to this. Would take all the tribalism out of it and all the power playing out of it. Because like when Klaus Schwab says, you'll own nothing and be happy, that does sound beautiful. I mean, if you want to look at it from a Buddhist point of view, but yeah. But I mean, I have my doubts, obviously, because it never turns out to be, but yeah. And I think, and the biggest thing is like when it comes to money, the part that makes money evil isn't its existence. I think it's interest rates. I honestly believe that's what corrupts money, is the fact that you can lend money and expect more money back than you lent that person. That once you centralize an organization like that the money will always inflation. You're now glued to inflation, and you're glued to debt, right? Because you can't escape that. And it's like, like in these countries that are flourishing right now, like, in Saudi Arabia and all these places, those banks, when they lend money, they don't collect interest. Like, interest is against the law in the Muslim faith. And that's why, because they know it will collapse everything. That if you have a central body that can make money off lending money, because you're basically printing money. Because we know that printing money creates inflation, right? But interest is the same thing, right? Because where does this extra money come from that you keep gaining onto your lending tab, right? It's being printed. It's being sucked out of the imbalance, right? So, like, mathematically, interest rate shouldn't exist because it breaks the equation, right? So, and we can't, like, the simple law of math is both sides of the equal sign have to be the same, otherwise it's not an equation. Yet we live with this equation that's got an imbalance on it. We just accept that, even though we're taught in grade 1 that can't exist. That's like,
yeah, that's because that's only because money's not real. It's that consensual construct thing. It's something we all buy into. You want a house? Well, here's a mortgage. So your house costs $100,000, but you're going to be paying back $300,000 because you're going to work hard, aren't you? You're going to be a good hard worker that can pay back 3 times. That's, like you say, that's lunacy. It's lunacy to let that be what that drives the UK economy. That alone. If you took that out of the equation in the UK economy would collapse overnight. If there wasn't that people working all the hours that they can possibly work just to be able to keep their house.
Well, is that, like, does that terrify you as someone from the UK that, like, I can't think of anything that the UK does for the world anymore. Like, I used to wear Doc Martens. Those were made in England somewhere, and I played a Marshall amplifier that was made in the UK somewhere. But other than that, I have never seen made in the UK on anything I've ever owned, anything I could ever purchase. Like, I'm sure you probably have some, like, maybe you guys have, like, people that make underwear and socks, and there's some guys that make sausages and stuff. But I mean, I'm sure there's probably some car manufacturers in the UK still, maybe. I don't know. Like, is there any cars made there anymore?
I don't think there are. I don't think we really make anything. Our engineering is focused on the North Sea. So a lot of our engineering is done up in Aberdeen and places like that. The big infrastructure projects that we have are probably, the steel will come from abroad because we don't have any steel mills here. We don't have any coal. So a lot of the industry went with Thatcher. Thatcher destroyed the coal mines and the steel foundries. So a lot of the industries that relied on that, like shipbuilding, car manufacture, any other kind of engineering like that, all went. So no, we are a service economy. That's what we are called. We're. I'm sure it probably says it in Wikipedia. We're a service economy. We sell insurance.
Well, yes, and that's what Canada's becoming quickly. Like, we're not quite there yet, but we're getting there. It's that we've, and most things that are manufactured in Canada are being manufactured by foreign companies, right? Like there's no Canadian car manufacturer that makes Canadian cars anymore, but we have Japanese cars made in Canada and Korean cars made in Canada.
Right.
But the American cars are made in Mexico. Canadian cars are made in Mexico now, which doesn't make sense to me. I don't like it's, it's, but I think it all boils down to kids. It all boils down to raping kids at the end of the day.
And on that happy note, well, I think we've got a decent blether there. That's for sure.
I think so, and we played 8 songs, so we should have a good solid 2 episodes. I hope too.
Yeah, I got a good two episodes plus a couple of blethers. I think once I sort that out.